Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Tropics Talk. Meteorologist Jim Dickey back with you, tracking now Hurricane Ian. Yeah, if this is the first thing you're seeing on this Monday morning, Ian did officially become a Category 1 hurricane overnight. All indications are this storm is really starting to take off here as it continues on its northwesterly track. You see how Ian has tracked over the last couple of days after forming in the eastern Caribbean Sea, worked its way westward, and now has started to feel the tug, that upper level low pressure area we were talking about over the last couple of days. Moving it northward, the center will go just to the west of the Caymans through the day today, and then likely move across the western end of Cuba. 75 mile per hour wind, so right at that Category 1 hurricane threshold, moving to the north and west at 14 miles per hour. As we take a look at the high resolution satellite presentation, you can sort of see the signs of this really ramping up in intensity. In particular, I want to point out this little feature right there. That's what's called a hot tower. It's basically a very tall, heavy, rotating thunderstorm. And that, along with what looks to be another one right about there, rotating around the center of the storm and starting to lay down the groundwork for the eye wall to form. In fact, you can sort of see that those areas I highlighted looping around the center, coming together, and now in this satellite presentation you can sort of make out what I think is the beginnings of the true core of what will eventually be Major Hurricane Ian. I suspect that will continue to become better and better defined over the next couple of hours. Eventually that clears out. We'll likely have a full cleared out eye with Ian in that vicinity as it works its way towards Cuba later on here tonight. You got the spiral bands going out from the center here too. Classic signature of a strengthening hurricane. All these areas here, that's clockwise outflow aloft. Air swirls in a counterclockwise fashion towards the center of the storm, rises up, and then vents out the top as high pressure sets up above the storm in a clockwise fashion. Again, you can sort of see that that's going in a clockwise area, that outflow on the side. When you see that, that tells you the storm is becoming vertically stacked, which is exactly the sort of structure a strong, healthy hurricane wants to take. A structure it takes is it is likely to, again, intensify going forward from here through the day today. We've been talking about this all week. The location Ian is at right now, basically ideal for this storm to strengthen. Deep ocean heat content, very warm water that goes to very low depths in the ocean. It's just going to act as rocket fuel for this, really. The upper level conditions have gone perfectly calm. The wind shear has gone away over the storm. There's really not much to hold this back in the near term as it lifts to the north and west. Yes, it will cross Cuba. There are some mountaintops there, some at least higher elevations there, but it's a very thin spit of land. It's not going to do much, if anything, to disrupt the core of the storm. Hurricane Center calls for this to be a Category 3 crossing the western end of Cuba, a Category 4 by 2 a.m. Wednesday, a Category 3 close to or over Florida by the time we get to early Thursday morning. Now, as we zoom in on the cone, remember, the cone is developed before the season. It's fitted to the centerline forecast the Hurricane Center produces. Before the season begins, the Hurricane Center goes back over the last 5 years, look at all the forecasts they've put out, and they figure out sort of the area to fit around the cone to represent where it will be 2/3 of the time, where the average forecast error includes all solutions that it would still be in the cone 2/3 of the time. The width of that cone with the model forecast error does include parts of southwest Florida by the time we get to Wednesday afternoon. So again, when you look at what the cone tells you in history, it could be all the way out here in the Gulf of Mexico. It could be much closer to us in southwest Florida. Now, that being said, there's very little model support at this point in time for a direct landfall in southwest Florida. Just about every model you look at keeps this west. In fact, I would say the models coming in after the 0Z runs this evening, are starting to trend further to the west. We talk about it in forecasting all the time. It's called the windshield wiper effect. Basically, all the models will come in one way, start to shift to the west, then they'll come back to the right, and then eventually they'll settle right on in the middle. And I think where that middle is going to end up being is Florida's Big Bend, somewhere around Cedar Key. To me, is the most likely landfall spot at this point in time. There's still wiggle room in this forecast. Certainly we could get something scraping by Tampa Bay. There's still their own possibility this makes a sharper turn and heads closer to Sarasota County, perhaps even scraping by the coast of southwest Florida. Or, still in the realm of possibility, we get something to work even further west, and we're talking more the Apalachicola area. But this is going to be a very large storm as it passes by. What the cone doesn't show you is how sort of far-reaching the impacts are. It's just, again, representing the error of that center line forecast. The impacts will well outsize that cone. So here's your current watches and warnings. There is a hurricane watch in effect. Sarasota County, northward through the Tampa area, through the St. Pete area. And that sort of speaks to in and of itself what the Hurricane Center is thinking for landfall, that this goes further to the north of Tampa, keeping the hurricane winds north of us in southwest Florida. Coastal Charlotte County, coastal Lee County, well, all of Charlotte and Lee, that is, under a tropical storm watch. Coastal Collier, a tropical storm watch, meaning tropical storm force winds, 40+ miles per hour, possible in the next 48 hours. And then the storm surge threat. We'll be talking about this at length, as I have been all morning long on ABC 7. This is a significant storm surge risk for southwest Florida. There's a storm surge watch in effect for Collier, coastal Lee, coastal Charlotte County, thanks to the threat for storm surge from this. In fact, as I look at the impacts from Ian, to me, this is becoming for us in southwest Florida more of a rain, flooding from rain, and storm surge flooding event than a wind event. There's still going to be some very strong winds, do not get me wrong, especially true coastal Lee and Charlotte counties. But at this point, it's not looking like the high-end wind event, whereas there's going to be a whole lot of rain with this, and the threat for storm surge is significant. That's why that watch is in effect now. There's also going to be the threat for spin-up tornadoes. Let's go through those impacts briefly. And again, I'm focusing in on southwest Florida. If you're looking for impacts, say, in the Tampa area, in Sarasota, points north, I mean, much different than what I'm talking about here. So I urge you to go to the National Weather Service, to their various, data streams. Get the latest from your local officials. Get the latest from your local stations. They will have more of a focused breakdown for you guys to our north. But for southwest Florida, I, again, do not think this is a high-end wind threat at this point in time. That can change. We'll be watching that. But you have to remember how the wind's set up around a hurricane. You see those big numbers, 130, 140 miles per hour, Category 4 hurricane. That's going to be in that eye wall, that ring of very intense thunderstorms that surrounds the center, which tends to only extend, even in the largest hurricanes, about 10 to 50 miles out from the center. So basically, you have to get into the core of the hurricane to see those major hurricane winds. Both the GFS and the European forecast model keep that core west of southwest Florida as this moves its way by the Tampa area. Of note here, too, over the last couple of days, you've heard a whole lot probably about the uncertainty in the forecast, that the GFS and the European were way spread out, that they were not coming into line. We'll look at that here this morning. The latest runs of the GFS and European very, very close to in line. Now, at this point, miles are going to make a difference, especially for the Tampa area, as far as the impacts they see. But when you see those two models lining up, both showing a similar scenario, a storm closely passing Tampa, headed into Big Bend, most models you look at saying that now you're getting more sort of confidence in the forecast that that is where the storm is headed. And of note, too, this is the 0Z run of the European. I've been looking at the 60, which is not in our computers yet. That one actually went a little further westward, that one that came in. But if we go with the European forecast model, and I'm going to lean on that here for the rest of this video, because the European has been a little more consistent than the GFS run to run over the last 2 days, this would be what the wind field would set up like as Ian is passing by us here in southwest Florida. Hurricane force winds would extend out the Lee County Islands, coastal Charlotte County, perhaps as far east as Northport and Port Charlotte. That's going to be your highest chance for hurricane winds in southwest Florida. The rest of us, tropical storm force winds over 40 miles per hour, and I just don't see it likely at this point that major hurricane winds make their way into southwest Florida. Again, if this does make more of a turn, yeah, then we could get some much stronger wind gusts, 100+ miles per hour closest to the coast. But at this point in time, that is not looking likely. Here are the peak gusts being put out by the European model, which I think of note too. even in Sarasota and Tampa, the European model doesn't show those high-end wind totals. That's something to track going forward. I think it's speaking to the models really weakening this storm as it moves northward into some higher wind shear over the northern Gulf of Mexico. But it shows some serious winds here. We're still talking wind gusts, coastal, Lee, and Charlotte counties to and over hurricane force, tropical storm force winds all the way inland to Lake Okeechobee that will, in all likelihood, cause some power outages, definitely cause a little bit of damage out there. Now, I don't think we're talking the, Hurricane Irma like 2-3 week power outages, but could certainly cause some issues with power outages as the storm comes in. Again, the Hurricane Center's thinking keeps the highest chances for hurricane force winds mainly north of southwest Florida. There is a 20% plus chance Sanibel, Captiva, coastal Charlotte County, including the Cape Hayes Peninsula, up towards Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte, Inglewood, the spot in southwest Florida where I'd say you have the highest chance to see hurricane force winds at this point in time. Those numbers really drop off as you head your way inland. This is going to be a big rain event for us. Like I said, I think sort of when you look at things going forward in time, this is becoming more of a rain and surge threat than a wind threat. Of note within all of this, on the European forecast model, notice how there's this sort of line showing up on the rain forecast graphic. That is a frontal boundary that'll be interacting with Ian as it lifts northward. All of this tropical moisture being drawn north from Ian, butting up against that front, sort of like a wall, forcing all of that deep tropical moisture to lift upward. When you do that, you produce a whole lot of rainfall, and that's what the models are spitting out like this one. You see the rain arriving as early as tonight. We're going to start to see, I think, the first rain bands rolling through. I think conditions really start to go downhill for us here in southwest Florida late tomorrow morning into the afternoon. We'll be tracking waves of heavy rainfall from then on. The most serious of the rain, the true hurricane rain bands around Ian, they will arrive Wednesday morning. We're still going to be tracking those rain bands wrapping around Ian, lashing us on into the evening hours on Wednesday. I think by the time we get to 9, 10, 11 o'clock, though, on Wednesday, and Ian Center is lifting north, that is when we really start to dry things out across the area. Still some pockets of rain, still a few lingering rain bands. At this point, Thursday morning, the heaviest of the rain is focused on northern Florida. Huge flooding threat, I think, for northern Florida, by the way. This includes Jacksonville. This includes Gainesville. You might not be hearing as much about the storm up there in northern Florida, but there is quite a flood threat, I think, from this, with the interaction of a slowing Ian and that front that'll be stalled out to the north. Here's our rain totals in southwest Florida from that European forecast model, which, if anything, I think may be a little bit underdone. 2 to 6 inches of rain is the call here. Widespread, there will be higher amounts, especially close to the coast, especially where any training rain bands set up. I think we'll easily get a couple of spots, 8, 10 inches of rain plus, by the time all is said and done. And then we got to talk about storm surge, which may be the most significant impact from this as we go forward. We're in a storm surge watch right now, and you can see why. Storm surge is basically the combination of the very low pressure of a hurricane and the strong winds taking the waters, in our case from the Gulf of Mexico, and forcing them on land. Look at where we are by 12 o'clock on Wednesday. Yes, the center in this model offshore, but the winds are pushing in out of the south and southwest right up along the coast, forcing that water to work its way to the coast, potentially up the various waterways, up Charlotte Harbor, up the Caloosahatchee, up the Imperial River in the Bonita area, right along the coast here in the 10,000 Islands. By 3 o'clock, we still have those onshore winds, which is also right about at high tide for much of southwest Florida. By 5, 6, and 7 o'clock, you still have those onshore winds. Now, they won't be quite as strong at this point in time, but as you keep those winds coming in off the Gulf, it's going to sort of hinder the water's ability to escape, to go back out into the Gulf. So this water could come in and stick around for quite a while. We're talking 3 to 6 foot storm surge totals in this model forecast being put out, which is more or less what the Hurricane Center is going with at this point in time too. Especially if you're in surge zone A, you need to be thinking about the possibility that your location could be 3 to 6 feet underwater starting Wednesday afternoon, lasting into early Thursday morning, and think about the possibility of trying to get yourself out of there before the storm arrives. As far as I know, as I'm recording this, No evacuation orders out just yet, but if we do get any of those, we'll of course bring them to you as soon as we get them here at ABC 7. And then there's the outlook for tornadoes. I do think the tornado threat will really start to pick up Tuesday night. So another thing to think about when you go to bed Tuesday night, be sure you have a way to get any warnings to you if they're put out. So I know that's a whole lot to unpack. Let's sort of wrap this up for you, looking at the timing of the worst impacts. The worst of the rain will arrive tomorrow, late morning, early afternoon, last through Wednesday evening. So we're talking a solid 24 plus hours of rounds of heavy, steady rainfall and the threat for flooding with that. The worst of the winds, they will hold off until Wednesday. It's as the core of the storm passes by. The worst winds in particular, close to the coast, I think Wednesday afternoon, timing-wise. At this point, the storm surge threat will also pick up Wednesday afternoon. That will last into Thursday morning. We'll, of course, be tracking Ian for you around the clock here at ABC 7, 24/7. We'll have updates, each and every advisory that comes out. We'll bring them to you live on ABC 7. We have our full 9 and 10 o'clock hours coming up here on ABC 7 in just a few moments. Chief Meteorologist John Patrick, he'll be back with you tonight at 6, 7, and 11 with all the latest model data, what we're thinking here as far as those impacts are concerned with Ian, which, yes, is set to be a significant storm for Southwest Florida. Until next time, meteorologist Jim Dickey, stay safe out there.